I've really enjoyed the core class figures, in particular the Soundwave from Kingdom. He's just a pocket-sized version of the character that does pretty much everything I'd want out of a Soundwave. He's even got a little cassette. What more could you want? However, as much as I like him, he has been somewhat supplanted now that I've got an Iron Factory's Sonicwave. So, cards on the table time, this was my first third-party Transformer, and he was a very generous birthday gift from my friend Longfang. Thank you. Before, I'd looked on at the third-party scene with a mixture of awe and horror, and never dared take the plunge. But once I spent some time with this little lad, yeah, I started to get it. As a thing to mess around with, he's got so much presence despite his small stature. He just has so much articulation, and with the extra hands you can swap out, you can put him in so many expressive poses. Frankly, it's hard to find any pose where he doesn't exude character, and I should know. I've spent days trying. Aesthetically, he's a nice update from the classic G1 Soundwave look, thankfully having the red arm stripes that were missing off the core class version. Which shouldn't have bothered me as much as it did, but it did. All you need to do is slap a spare Decepticon logo on his tape deck door and you're good to go. Accessory wise, he's got a fair few bits and pieces. There's his classic guns, the non-shoulder one can even have its handle folded away for a double shoulder cannon look if you're into such things. He's got Megatron in gun form, which is perhaps a little large, but it is fun and mass displacement, so whatever. And then there's his hands. Many hands. He's got standard fists, fists with holes for gun handles, open hands, a blaster hand, and, amusingly, a hand for pressing his own buttons like the little deviant he is. Although personally I prefer to use it to point accusatively at people instead. Due to his transformation, the tip of the gun is removable, and the holes in the end of his guns are the same size as his wrist holes, so, you know... handguns. Honestly, the only real quibbles I have with the robot mode is that he does hold his gun a little weird, and it would have been nice if he had a small tape in his chest door, but then he's got transformation stuff going on in there, so it's really a minor issue, and to be honest, I probably wouldn't have even thought of that as a missing feature for a figure this size if the core class one didn't have one. But robot aside, what about the alt modes? And yes, plural alt modes, because he's a triple changer, because why not? His first mode is, well, it's certainly a Cybertronian mode. Despite it looking mostly like a pile of Soundwave's bits on wheels, on account of that being exactly what it is, I do quite enjoy getting there. I'm a big fan of the side panels doing a cheeky flip on the way round. However, it should be noted that even though both his guns are used in the transformation, there isn't anywhere you're supposed to put the end of his gun in either of his alt modes, so, you know, just try not to lose it. Or jam it into his feet, I guess, pretend it's an aerial, use your imagination. Also, the transformation is really only supposed to work with the closed fists, but it can work with one closed and one open fist, just in case you're like me and you want to display him with his gun, but you don't feel like getting out the baggie of hands every time you want to transform him. But yeah, I think there's just something very funny about how dorky this mode looks when compared to how cool the robot mode is. So I can't help but forgive it for not really looking like much. It's charmingly chunky. His other alt mode is what the instructions call calculation mode, which is basically just his classic Walkman mode, which is surprisingly fiddly to get to considering it's just him turning into a rectangle. Getting the panels from the side of his legs to clip in can be a bit of a time, but once it's done, it certainly does the job, and I'm glad it's there, just maybe don't look at the back. But I suppose that's just a triple changer thing, isn't it? There's always going to be a little compromise, and it's up to you to decide if they're in places that are a problem for you. But since most people will just be displaying him in robot mode, keeping them to the alt modes is probably smart. So I really like Iron Factory's Sonicwave, and whilst he may have displaced my core class Soundwave to some extent, ultimately that's not really a fair comparison. The core class one is more of a cheap desk toy that you can idly mess with, and it's not a big deal if you launch it across the room due to getting a Discord ping you weren't expecting. It's tough, it'll survive. whereas Sonicwave is more of an expensive and delicate adult collectible thing, meant to look pretty in whatever pose you put him in on the shelf, and he does that wonderfully, so I suppose they both fulfill the roles they're actually meant for, and there is room in my heart for both. But let's not kid around, for me at least, Sonicwave's superior.